I think a little caffeine is not harmful. But when women, I mean, this goes for men too, men and women, you feel tired, you're exhausted, and you're using the caffeine to get through your day, it does more harm than good. And so you're kind of almost at a crossroads, like you need to function. You need some caffeine to function, but then it's going to make the whole condition worse because caffeine is stimulatory, and when it's stimulating, you're releasing more adrenaline and more cortisol. And so it backfires. Welcome to Living on Purpose, a journey to vibrant living. I'm Dr. Allison Brumley, and I'm thrilled to have you here today. Our podcast is one where we really want to empower women to understand their bodies, how they work, what we need to do to get everything functioning appropriately. And today's topic is a big one. We're going to talk about adrenal health. They're these tiny little glands, but they're mighty. They do a lot of work for us to help manage our stress, our resilience, and how our body functions. So as we dive into this topic this week, I'm here with my co-host, Karen.
And I'm a health and wellness coach, and I get really excited about helping women with tools to help them take the knowledge we're giving them and put it into actionable steps. And so the adrenals are a big one. And so maybe, Dr. Brumley, why don't you start us off with telling us even what adrenals are, where they're located, and why they're important to help us as women with our hormones.
Yeah, the basic anatomy of our adrenal glands is that they're a tiny little triangular shaped glands that sits kind of like a hat right on your kidney. And you got two of them, one on each side. And they do a lot for us. And in where we are just in society and the stresses that we have with so many things to do, they can really get punched. And I do see a lot of women really feel a lot of burnout, like you're just running on empty. So the adrenal glands, they have a cortex and a medulla. So there's these different layers within that little triangular gland, and they make cortisol and DHEA and aldosterone. Those are the main hormones that we think about and that we can measure in blood work when we're looking at the health of the adrenal glands that then support just about every other organ system in the body. And so, having healthy adrenal glands just makes all the difference for women.
So maybe we could talk a little bit about how a woman would know that her adrenal glands aren't very healthy. Like I hear women say when they're trying to go to sleep at night, they feel tired, they feel exhausted, but they have this wired brain that they can't turn off. Talk to us a little bit about why that is happening and maybe some other symptoms that it's like, if I see this, I know that my adrenal glands are either crashing or have completely burnt out.
Mm-hmm. Usually there can be 3 or 4 phases to the adrenal glands. The first is just kind of your warning, that things are not good. And that can be more that wired and tired that you just described, where you're tired, but it's either sleep isn't restful, you don't wake up feeling better after a good night's sleep or after a nap, and you can release too much adrenaline or epinephrine, and that makes you feel a little more anxious. So you can not only have the wired, but a little anxiety with that too. And you can oftentimes see some weight gain, especially around the midsection as your cortisol levels are raising. They're high in those initial acute stages.
So maybe talk to us a little bit about that cortisol hormone. So it kind of does this, raises in the morning.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Talk to us about that and why maybe it's not tapering off the way it should and some of those.
It definitely has this diurnal curve where we want cortisol to be high in the morning. It should start coming up before you wake up. So it can go to your liver and break down glycogen stores And so then that releases glucose, and you get some glucose in your brain, and then you can wake up. You can wake up and feel decent.
So we need cortisol.
We need cortisol. Okay. It helps so much with blood sugar regulation. And then it helps with the immune system. And cortisol, I mean, we think of it as our stress hormone, so that when, that acute, I remember in school always talking about, the running from the tiger. You're running from a tiger, and then you run away, the tiger's not there anymore, and then the body can settle back down from that acute stress response. But here, where we are in life, we have way too many people in chronic stress. They're always in that fight or flight mode of go, 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 like they're running from the tiger. As we see women not only caretake children, and then they're working, and then they have church assignments or whatever it is. There's just so many things going on. It's just complicated and not simple anymore to manage stress.
And so that cortisol stays high and doesn't do the peak and start to come down.
Yeah. If you skip meals, it'll raise.
And stay.
And some people, it can be difficult for people who work graveyards, because then their cortisol, the normal cortisol curve can be flip-flopped, where you need a higher cortisol through the night.
Rhythm is changed. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there are definitely some of those things, but some people, if they don't have stressors in other areas, they can work a graveyard shift. But it's just the gives and takes of life that you want to just be mindful of, really aware of what stresses me out and where can I cut back, or how do I manage that stress a little better.
Because stress is good for us. It's just too much stress for sustained periods of time and never coming off of it that wears out those adrenal glands.
Yeah, I mean, even thinking about exercise. Exercise is a stress for us. So based on how much cortisol you have and how you feel, there's something called the cortisol awakening response. And for people who have low cortisol in the morning, there are ways to exercise and to eat and to, live a lifestyle so that cortisol can return to being higher in the morning. And then if you get a second wind at night, it might mean that the cortisol is a little elevated at night, but you want cortisol low as you go to sleep through the night, comes up in the morning, and just a gentle little curve through the day.
So maybe let's talk about some of the warning signs that we're not regulating our stress well, and maybe we can give our listeners some tools in how to wind down a little better.
Yeah, let's do that. That's my favorite part, is coming to the lifestyle and the treatment options for that. But really, the main warning signs are that you feel more tired, sluggish as you wake up, and there can be a number of things that can contribute to that. But if you have good adrenal function and good cortisol, then a lot of those other functions work better too. So it kind of is one of those root causes or the crux of what happens with the rest of our organ systems. But if you wake up feeling sluggish and tired, you need a cup of coffee before you can really wake up. It's the feeling wired and tired that we mentioned, that you can't get, that the sleep isn't restful. It doesn't feel restorative. And ups and downs of your blood sugar levels, that can be an early warning sign. You get hypoglycemic. If you haven't eaten for 3 or 4 hours, you're lightheaded, you have a headache, you could be dizzy and irritable, and then not easily able to fall asleep at night.
When I was doing some schooling and training on this HPA axis, or this adrenal gland, a lot of the stories that came with that were women going through medical school.
Oh, absolutely.
And doing long shifts, doing residencies, long shifts, eating really poorly. not managing that blood sugar. And then all of a sudden they can't wake up in the morning. They can't get their brain going because they've crashed. So talk to us a little bit about our circadian rhythm and why it's important to get good restful sleep and kind of get a rhythm going so our bodies have time to recover.
Yeah, that restful sleep is so important because during that time, if you don't have good cortisol, good adrenal function, you're less likely to release the growth hormone for repair and recovery. So if you're not, secreting some of that growth hormone and you don't get the repair and recovery, things just really, they just end up snowballing to poorer and poorer and poorer health. So, there are great things about, what you should do when you wake up, what you should do through the day, and what you should do before bed. And keeping a routine, like scheduling when you wake up, when you exercise, when you eat, until it really just becomes a part of you. It's nice to just have it written down somewhere or, make it just that's this routine where you do the same thing most every day. There are life instances that will throw us off, but then you get right back to it. Probably the biggest thing I hear is people are on a path, they're doing really good, then they go on vacation and they don't do anything about it. They're staying up late or drinking too much and, sleeping in. And so you get kind of off that routine. And then they get home and it can be really hard to get back to the routine. But the better you are with that, the better those adrenals will work. And, in thinking about the adrenals, they make the cortisol, that stress hormone for us, great, but they also make DHEA. And DHEA is very important for energy, vitality. It helps support the immune system in the natural killer cells when they're trying to fight bad infections or cancers and things like that. And then there's also aldosterone. Aldosterone helps us hold in sodium so that we need sodium. So that sodium is basically the electrical charge in our body. It's an anion, so it's got a positive charge on it. And it helps our cells open and close, and you're opening to let nutrients and hormones in, and to also let toxins out. So we need this sodium. And in adrenal fatigue, which is really it's an alternative term for chronic stress. But this adrenal fatigue, if you're not making enough aldosterone, you can feel thirsty. Like you think, I'm drinking so much water, but I'm always thirsty. And then every time I drink water, I have to go to the bathroom. And you're just not retaining the sodium that you need. And there are diseases where you retain too much sodium, and you have to be somewhat careful with that. You can get high blood pressure from that. But as far as chronic stress, it's almost always low. So then I'll say drink an electrolyte drink, that's got some sodium and potassium in it. Aldosterone's a little more specific just about the sodium, gathering more sodium in instead of letting it flow out through the kidneys. But it does let potassium flow out through the kidneys. But if you're like, I drink a lot of water, I drink, 3 liters or whatever it is, and I'm always thirsty and I have to pee every hour, and then you might be low in aldosterone.
Okay. So, I'm sure we have a lot of listeners that are kind of in a range of second. We have women that have careers that are go, 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 or maybe late into the night and long hours and rely on, a little bit of caffeine to get going in the morning or to sustain energy. At what point is caffeine harmful?
I think a little caffeine is not harmful. But when women, this goes for men too, men and women, you feel tired, you're exhausted, and you're using the caffeine to get through your day, it does more harm than good. And so you're kind of almost at a crossroads. Like you need to function, you need some caffeine to function, but then it's going to make the whole condition worse because caffeine is stimulatory, and when it's stimulating, you're releasing more adrenaline and more cortisol. And so it backfires. And, I think, 60, 80 milligrams of caffeine, like a cup of, half a cup of coffee or a cup of green tea, or there's yerba mate, and some of these others that, like yerba mate, it's still energizing, maybe like a guarana. Both of those are herbs. But the caffeine in them isn't like the caffeine in like coffee, or a little caffeine in chocolate and dark chocolate. I think a bite of that in the afternoon's great. And a lot of people do have afternoon fatigue, which may or may not be just somewhat physiological. You look at some cultures that they take afternoon naps, and other cultures that have tea time in the afternoon, whether it's black tea or green tea or yerba mate. They have tea time in the afternoon because then it gives them a little pick-me-up. So I think things like that are okay, but great caution in drinking too much caffeine. You have one or two monsters a day, like eventually you're going to crash.
Yeah, we probably are over caffeinated with the wrong kinds in our American culture. Mm-hmm. And it's really okay to kind of take those 5-10 minute naps, restorative. If you're in the corporate world, go in your office, take a little bit of a rest. If you're a mom, lay down with the kids in the afternoon and take a rest.
Yeah.
Another thing that came to mind is we probably have our moms out there that are listening that are up all night with babies and doing that, and they're not in that good circadian rhythm. But one thing I have learned is that taking care of a baby actually doesn't raise cortisol. It actually helps keep you more in balance. So, nature has a way of compensating for raising children.
Yeah.
And I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Because as I see women in that exact scenario in clinic, the majority of them still feel pretty good. Regardless, they're like, maybe I get a stretch of 3 or 4 hours if I'm lucky. Mm-hmm. And but that gets better and better. And I do. I think nature compensates for that.
Yeah. Some energizing things are like the electrolytes that helps energize us, and the good B vitamins. What are some of those herbs and things that can naturally calm down? Maybe take more in the evening?
Yeah, there are a category of herbs called adaptogens. And those are the ones that you think of them as adapting to stress. They help our body adapt to stress. And so some of those can be taken morning or night. It might be when is your stress the highest, and when do you really need to settle things down. And you can do those as a tea or a tincture or a capsule supplement. One of my favorites is holy basil. It's a wonderful adaptogen. It's also known as tulsi. And you can get that in any of those forms, but it helps give us that resilience we need when we have too much stress in our lives. There's a number of herbs, ashwagandha, rhodiola. Those are probably the most well-known ones, and I like them. I like them a lot. I'll use licorice root. Sometimes you have to be a little careful of licorice root. It can increase potassium and blood pressure. It's always on the list of don't take when you're pregnant because of the potential of increased blood pressure. But licorice root increases the half-life of cortisol, so it doesn't take as much energy for the body to maintain its cortisol levels. So there are some specifics. Eleutherococcus or Siberian ginseng is the most tropic for the adrenal glands, which basically means that the adrenal glands really understand when they get that eleuthero, it's very nourishing. Very, very nourishing to the adrenal gland, and probably one of the best ways to restore function. So I'll usually combine a couple of those herbs, maybe an eleutherococcus with the holy basil or ashwagandha, And then you get that tropic or restorative plus the adaptogen.
Awesome. I love all those. And I think holy basil or tulsi tea is one of my favorite.
So good.
I really like that.
Yeah.
In talking about nourishing that adrenal gland, what are your top foods?
Well, it's mostly the worst thing you can do is sugar and caffeine. So sugar in the form of any refined carbohydrate, white flour, white sugar, those are the worst. But the best,
stress it out.
They totally stress it out. And the best is really just your whole foods. And so thinking about, the foods where you've got your proteins, your carbohydrates, your fats in good proportions. And some people run a little better on carbohydrates and other a little better on proteins. And you can typically tell, do you do better? If you go to, a high protein diet, does it make your hair fall out and you feel tired? Then the high protein's not for you. So I see a few people, not too many, in clinic where they're doing their macros. I've got these women going up to 140 grams of protein a day, and I don't typically see that helpful. But some women just thrive on the high protein and others the carbohydrate. But the carbohydrate gives you quicker energy. So if you're choosing a carbohydrate, you want to choose one that's that complex carbohydrate, like your sweet potatoes and squashes and whole wheat grains, like a brown rice over a white rice. It will give you more energy, more fiber, more nutrition. The adrenal glands really, they hold the most vitamin C of any organ in our body. So it needs a lot of vitamin C, and we get vitamin C from red peppers are one of the highest foods in vitamin C. Some citrus. There's a lot of vitamin C in food. It's whole foods, bright, colorful vegetables. You need some protein, whether that's going to be animal proteins like eggs and chicken and seafood, or your legumes if you don't do animal protein. Really getting the lentils and the beans in and things like that. Nourish those adrenal glands.
I really like that a lot. So in maybe wrapping up this segment on the adrenal glands, this is kind of putting you on the spot and me on the spot too. What's one thing you're going to do to maybe help nourish your adrenal glands in the upcoming week?
Oh, for me, it's pretty much a constant goal is to get to bed on time. I have a tendency to if I'm working on something, I just want to finish it up. Or if I'm watching a movie, I want to finish it up, even though it's bedtime. And the dogs will go lay in bed, and then I'm up. I'm up, usually working, usually on the computer working at that time. So, but it is, I have done better, and there are times when I've got too much going on and I'm worse. But that's my biggie. I'm very good at not skipping meals. I don't feel good if I skip meals. But get to bed. Those adrenal glands need a lot of rest. If you're in the recovery phase of adrenal fatigue, you need rest, and that's a minimum of 8 hours.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things that helps me wind down at night is I have to remember to turn the lights down, maybe turn the lights off and turn the lamps on to help that circadian rhythm start that unwinding process. I think for me, I'm learning to say yes to more things that feel playful and no to more things that feel really stressful. And for women, that's hard. We forget to play. We just think we need to nourish and help take care of everyone else, but we ourselves forget to play. So learning to play has been a big one for me. So
that's good.
Kind of help relieve some of that stress.
That's good.
So for our listeners, we want you to maybe interact with us in the comments of something that maybe you're going to commit to this coming week to help nourish your adrenal glands. Either maybe drink a little less caffeine and put in some more nourishing foods to help your bodies nourish. But interact with us. Subscribe to our channel and let us know what you want to learn more about.
That sounds wonderful. Thanks, Karen.
You're welcome, and let's have you keep living vibrantly until next week when you tune in again.